Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings, Florida over a century ago. These are stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So sit back and enjoy as I share a few of the stories from the September 12, 1919 edition. Jack's mob failed to find Negro intended to lynch. Expecting to find Ed Jones, a rapist who was spirited from the Duval County Jail to the county jail here early Monday morning, a mob numbering about 100 men arrived here Tuesday morning in automobiles from Jacksonville, determined to lynch the Negro. But they were disappointed, as Sheriff Boyce had been forewarned of their coming and started the man under the escort of 2 deputies on another trip to safety. 14 cars rolled into the city about 1:30. The men jumped from their cars and marched to the jail, but a short distance away they were halted by an armed guard who demanded they state their business. They said they wanted to see the sheriff, and the guard called for Sheriff Boyce. "We have come for that Negro Ed Jones," explained the spokesman of the party, "and we intend to get him." Sheriff Boyce replied, "You'll have to keep on traveling then, for he is not here." The men could not be convinced that the much-wanted man had been removed, and they asked Sheriff Boyce to turn him over to them, stating that they would fix it with the governor so he would not get into trouble. They stated that they did not want to use force, but they had come for the man and would get him before they left. Sheriff Boyce told them the man had been taken from the jail and sent away hours ago, but they wouldn't believe him. They said he could convince them only by permitting them to look the prisoners over, and Sheriff Boyce announced that he was perfectly willing to do this. He asked if there were any men in the crowd who could identify the prisoner. 2 men stepped forth and said they would recognize him if he were among the prisoners. These men were escorted into the jail by the sheriff, and they looked at the prisoners, failing to find their man. When they reached Henry Hill, they said he was the man they wanted. Sheriff Boyce jumped in and told them they were mistaken, and he would not permit them to wreak their vengeance on an innocent man. They called for proof of Hill's identity, and fortunately, he had his registration card in a pocketbook, which he carried inside his shirt. After looking this over, the men were satisfied of their mistake, and they withdrew. The mob visited the stockade at the rear of the jail and inspected the prisoners there, holding the guard up with pistols. They were unable to find their man there and left. Being convinced that they had been outwitted, they rushed to their cars and started for Palatka, where they also searched the jail without success. Ed Jones, the man sought by the Jacksonville men, is hidden away, and the place where he is incarcerated is a secret that will not be revealed, so it will be impossible for the mob to locate him again. While the lynch mob did not find Ed Jones, back in Duval County, they did hold the jailer at gunpoint so they could take and kill 2 other black men who had been charged with leading a mob that killed a white man a month earlier. In response to the lynchings, the sheriff in Duval County doubled his deputy force and a curfew was put in place. Deep Creek dredge work is progressing. The dredge work on Deep Creek is on in earnest, and if the work continues at the present rate, the creek will soon be in such condition that big boats may come up as far as the railroad bridge. The engineer has been somewhat handicapped on account of not having enough help to get along at the regular rate the dredge is capable of going, but at the present time the work is progressing rapidly and will soon be completed. At a meeting some time ago, the farmers and businessmen of Hastings discussed the advantage of buying a boat or getting in touch with someone with a boat of good tonnage who would be willing to make regular runs and contract for a certain percentage of the freight that will be handled now and up until and including the next potato season. At the meeting, it was held that with the constant freight hauling, judging from transportation now, there would be enough paid a year round. This improvement will prove to be one of the biggest assets to Hastings and will help make this more like a city. Barbershop sold to Frank Oliver. It was announced yesterday that M.H. Rawls, the proprietor of the Hastings Barbershop, has sold out to Frank Oliver of Palatka. Mr. Oliver now owns and operates the Putnam shop at that place and is the sort of man who knows a good thing when he sees it. Possession was given yesterday. Mr. Oliver intends to be here and manage and operate the shop with the help of Mr. McGuffin. Mr. Rawls will retire from the barber business and will take up farming at Alachua, Florida, where he will reside in the future. We are glad to hear of the move Mr. Oliver is taking, but at the same time are sorry to have our friend Big Boy leave us. North River Bridge to be separate on ballots. As a result of the regular September meeting of the St. Johns County Commissioners held at the courthouse Tuesday, it can be announced that the ballots for voters to cast in the proposed bonding election will contain 3 separate propositions: a bridge to Anastasia Island, a bridge over North River, and a permanent hard-surfaced road system for the county. Diplomatic relations between the St. Johns County Commissioners and the State Road Department were practically broken off when Chairman Corbett declared that, in his opinion, there is a kindergarten running the road work at the state of Tallahassee, and announced that he had told the road department to take their trucks out of the county, in which action he was unanimously backed up by the board. It was brought out that the heavy Army trucks sent there for road work by the State Highway Commissioner were destroying roads rather than benefiting them, that they were making no more trips a day than the mule teams, and that the state engineer had told Chairman Corbett that the county of St. Johns was being charged $15 a day for the use of the free trucks. The amount is being entered against the state aid fund due this county. Mr. Corbett stated that the board had been assured before the trucks were sent that there would be no cost to the county save the depreciation of the equipment. "They promised us everything," said Mr. Corbett, "till they got back in, and now they have repudiated what roads they had positively assured me they would take over and relieve the county of maintaining." Seriously hurt by baseball. The practice indulged in by boys of using the streets as a playground resulted on Thursday in a serious accident to Mrs. Harry Jackson. Mrs. Jackson was walking with her daughter Miss Marion when they encountered a group of boys playing baseball. The ball, hurled by a careless youngster evidently without a thought of passing pedestrian, struck Mrs. Jackson in the mouth. She was rendered unconscious by the blow, and help being summoned, she was carried to her home, where medical aid was immediately given. Several teeth were loosened, and Mrs. Jackson's face is badly cut and bruised by reason of the accident. She is reported to be making favorable progress today, although the shock was very great and a good deal of suffering has been entailed. Electricians after more money. Local electricians are asking for an advance in the weekly wage scale from 50 to 75 cents an hour. The high cost of living is responsible for their demands. Employing electricians, it is said, are not prepared to accede to the demand for this advance, having contracts based on the original wage scale. Only the journeyman electricians are affected by the demand, as the salaried electricians are not employed on an hourly basis. Burning fuel oil. Oil is now being used as fuel by the St. John's Electric Company at its plant. 2 boilers are operating with oil fuel, and a third is being changed to oil burner. The liquid is much more convenient and satisfactory, and is also cleaner than coal or wood. From the editorial section. Dear Sir, you are probably aware that there is a great deal of dissatisfaction regarding the conditions of the Hastings School. So much so that some of us have agreed to call a mass meeting of the school patrons to see what can be done to improve conditions. Hastings ought to have at least a $50,000 school building. Our children deserve just as good teachers as can be secured. It is our purpose to arouse sentiment in favor of a bond election for a new building, and will appreciate the cooperation of the Herald. I would like to see the Herald get behind this campaign in earnest and help push this thing through. If you are not familiar with the present disgraceful conditions, a visit to the school grounds will do you good. Yours truly, O.S. Vanneman. The Hastings Herald had more than stories you'd find in modern newspapers, but also local notices that were more of a social report, a way to know what was going on in town and in the personal lives of its residents. Here are a few from this edition. Appreciated gift. Jack Bush, son of Mr. and Mrs. J.D. Bush, is justly proud of a gift he received a day or two ago from D.B. Parker of Richmond, Virginia. The gift is a thoroughbred collie with a pedigree 3 yards long. The pedigree was presented with the canine. The collie is a beautiful animal. The name is Lockmar Rogers, and it is registered under that name. If you're wondering how things are progressing on that messy piece of the Dixie Highway in 1919, here's an update from folks returning to town from vacation. Motored to Miami. Raymond E. Moss, Dr. Sellers, and a party of friends have returned from a motor trip to Miami. They report the road north of Daytona for about 5 miles to be in a deplorable condition, the sand being a foot deep. They were able to pull through without a breakdown, but the traveling was anything but pleasant on this particular stretch. They are enthusiastic about the roads in Dade and Palm Beach counties. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. And to wrap up this week in Hastings Headline History, how about a tune from the time? A 1919 hit. Here's A Rose, a Kiss, and You by John Steele.
In the cool, sweet calm of the evening hour, when the golden sun sinks low, and the mystic spell of an unseen power brings back the long ago, then memories three come back to me, to fill my life with a cheer. A rose so fine, a kiss divine, and your sweet spirit dear. A rose, a kiss, and you, my Trinity of love. A rose, a kiss, and you, all sent from heaven above. The rose with its token, the kiss with its thrill, and wonderful you may it be God's will. I'll take with me through eternity a rose, a kiss, and you. The rose with its token, the kiss with its ring,